Okay, and we are recording. Welcome to the Region 12 Team Manager Training. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Hopefully it's not too early for you. My name is Vince Pisciano. I am the Regional Director of the local DI. Got some exciting news for people that have been here before. We actually picked up a couple more counties just to the north of us that will be joining us in our region. In a moment, I'm going to introduce the rest of the regional board. I just want to mention last night I was grabbing this list and I was tabulating how many years of experience we have on the board. And I stopped counting when we got to over 200 years worth of experience. And why that's interesting is while only 25% of those board members have children that are in the program, there are over 150,000 other people throughout the globe that are part of this program. And you may ask yourself, you may be asking yourself why you're doing DI. Let me tell you why those other 150,000 people are doing it. They've seen firsthand how DI improves the lives of both their children and the students that are on their team. These children become more engaged, more creative, more self-confident. They become better collaborators both at school, greater classmates, greater, for the long term, they're going to become greater coworkers, and they're just generally more inquisitive. I've seen it in my own daughter who will stop me. She'll actually call me while she's driving in her car and ask me a question about something she saw on the road that it blows my mind. Well, I'm not happy that she's calling while she's driving, but it blows my mind that she's that inquisitive that she wants to know about these things. Every student that is on our team, they're going to know by the time they get out of high school that, common history facts. They're going to know common algebra and math facts, but that's not enough in today's world. They need in their toolbox the ability to approach an impossible challenge, think critically, and solve that problem creatively. Now, there are other programs out there in the world that teach these things, but what differentiates DI, and you're going to hear this ad nauseum this year, every year actually, but you're probably going to get tired of it, is we have a non-interference policy. You as a team manager do not do your students any favors when you do things for them. In fact, every time you do something for them, every time you get frustrated because they're stripping the screws and you grab that screw gun and say, oh, I'm gonna do it myself. Every time you do that, you steal from them the opportunity for them to learn and grow on their own. I mean, you may know in your heart of hearts that in order to assemble this widget, you need a T75 hinge and a X32 glue. I just made those up. But the students will never learn if you interfere and tell them. And maybe, just maybe, they actually have their own solution. It may not be as good as yours. It may not be what you think it is, but it may very well be twice as creative, and they may surprise you. I know as a parent, we only want what's best for our children, and we, it breaks our heart to see them fail. But trying and failing is what will develop more grit and more determination in the world, and that grit and determination will take them far in their lives. So I need you all to put this somewhere on the wall, put it in the top of your brain. When you start every DI meeting, just say to yourself, it's not my solution, it's their solution. Let me repeat that. It's not my solution, it's their solution. So with that, I want to recognize the board members here in the Dayton region. We have Tricia Bauer, Matt Becker, Donna Fontaine, Beth Frazier, who's joining us today, Dave Gorell, Scott Goldberg, Dee Gordon, Warren Gordon, Renee Griffith, Barb Prail, Doug Prail, who's here with us today, running the show here, Rob Thompson, who is also here with us today, and Janine Yosua. Now, excuse me one second here. You may recognize some of these names coming from your school, coming from your district. I want to assure you each and every one of them is committed to the success of DI, and by that extension, they're committed to your team. You may recognize some of those team managers that you may very well be competing against them. Competing against them is kind of a misnomer because really the team is trying to solve their own challenge. But let me assure you, especially if you're a new team manager, we segment our board. We have the administrative section over here and the competitive section over here. And none of the team managers that are also board members gain any advantage by being on the board. So with COVID-19 this year, there's a whole new set of obstacles. This virtual format that we're all experiencing at the same time has its own set of challenges, but quite frankly, it presents new opportunities. Like I say, we're all meeting here right now. We didn't have to get dressed up and go to, normally this meeting happens at 8 o'clock at Sinclair, and trust me, it's an early call. So we get the opportunity of that. So if you are a senior level team manager, your students are going to be applying to college soon, and the virtual DI experience that they're learning and growing on, they're going to learn how to manage their own meetings. That's something they'll be able to leverage during their application process. If you're an elementary team manager, let me put my rose-colored glasses on for a moment. And I truly affect, even with 200,000 people dead here in the United States and all the disruption, that we're going to get through this, and down the road, this is going to be a positive for the world economy in the long run, learning how to live with this and learning how to survive and go on. So, and flourish is what I meant to say. The employers in the future are going to demand that their employees have this virtual experience, that they be very proficient at it. It's one thing to attend a meeting. It's another to lead a meeting virtually. It's a lot easier doing it in person than it is doing it virtually. And let me just say, for the elementary teams, half the jobs your students will eventually seek haven't even been created yet. So this will get them a leg up in the future. And finally, if you're a middle school teacher, middle school level team, God bless you. I think all of us can remember the decade that I spent in middle school, and it's locked away there. I don't want to relive it. So if you're a middle school team manager, just be there for them. Be a safe space that they can come to, and they don't know it yet, but high school is just around the corner, and better days are ahead. Finally, when we finish here and you have your first meeting, as the kids are bickering or you're having technology problems or no one knows exactly what they're going to do, just sit back and make a mental note of what's going on. Look at Mike over here that's not talking, and someone else is checked out. Look at that chaos and just store that memory away. In March, when we gather again, unfortunately virtually, to celebrate your success, bring back that memory, see where your team is now, see the video that they posted, and the utter joy and sense of satisfaction they had from that video. That was largely because of you. So I need you to celebrate that success as a team manager. Remember how you got them to the finish line. Okay, that was my introduction, a bit of housekeeping. We have a lot to cover today, so go ahead and keep any questions you have, maybe jot them down. If you have an immediate question, you can go ahead and put it into chat, and someone else will try to answer it for you. We will have a Q&A at the end, but we will also, if time allows, have some Q&A in between. We'll have a 5-minute break about an hour in. All of our information is available on our website. And as I mentioned, we are recording this meeting, so we'll publish it to our webpage when we're done. And with that, I am done, and I'd like to turn it over to Beth Frazier, who will talk to you about the next topic. Thank you.
Oops, I'm unmuted. Okay, great. Hello, everyone. I'm here to talk about managing group dynamics when you're working with children. You might have anywhere from 4 to 7 children that you're going to be working with at different ages at this elementary stage or junior high or senior level. I know some of you are already experienced in doing this, and some of you may be new to this, but one of the things that we're looking at here is to stay focused on what DI is really all about. And it's learning about each other, relationships, and of course, problem solving. It's learning to do all those things as a group. And it's not just about getting medals and trophies, but it's a lot about the experience and all the things that they're going to learn about themselves and others, and the problem solving process. Next slide. So prepare yourself and your team, and that's parents and kids, to expect and manage common problems that come up in the group at different times in the group dynamics. You have kids with different personalities and just all levels of ideas, and there's opportunities to have, or to help the kids learn about themselves and figure out how to solve these real life issues, which I know for so many of my students and kids that I worked with in doing OM and DI, when they got older, it really became, they would say that has been so helpful for them to, use this process in real life. Okay. So again, when these meetings start taking place, you might want to have even parents there at the first meeting, but to set and consistently enforce clear expectations about appropriate behaviors. Kids will adjust their behaviors to what you expect and the consequences that they might experience. This is going to be a whole different routine this year with being virtual. And so, but from the get-go, it's clear to set up how you're going to, have these, what should be the rules, and maybe your team, older teams can even help you come up with some of these rules, and to be clear about the expectations of what you expect. Okay, next slide. And one important thing that's noted is that don't ignore misbehavior, especially during the initial team meetings. It's so important to set that tone to begin with. And because if you don't, it rarely autocorrects itself. And so it's important to establish the base of your rules and expectations from the beginning. Okay. And with the, we're recognizing there was a psychologist who came up with how the stages here of group dynamics really works. And this was established for adult task teams as well. And it seems to apply to many groups who come together and the group dynamics. The first one called forming, and here the members, it's the first meeting. The members are usually very polite and positive. And as they, move on, the forming stage, where now might be some who are starting to push the boundaries. There might be some who are going to interrupt or want to take charge of everything. They might challenge authority. So during this stage, DI teams, can be a little more disruptive and talk more about I rather than we. And so it's kind of getting them through those stages. The next one is called norming. And this is where they begin to resolve differences. They begin to appreciate other team members. As they work longer together, this is an important aspect. And then performing. And here we're at the point where processes lead to achievement of the team's goal. And they can celebrate that. And one thing that is not here, but at the very end and even after the tournament, they can celebrate and in an adjourning stage. Okay, we're done, but now we're going to celebrate what we've accomplished and what we've learned. Okay, next slide. So again, determine what issues should be discussed in the group versus an individual concern to be managed. Sometimes you do have the right and the responsibility to, of course, set the expectations of the group. And there could be problems that, develop, and as they do, teach the team how to understand and respond to each other's, and this has to do with a lot of interpersonal things that can come up with kids who, maybe just don't agree on things or they bother each other. But that's a whole part of this group dynamics in this process of learning how to come to some, compromise and consensus about how we're going to deal with those kinds of interpersonal issues. Again, some issues might need to be dealt with privately and not in a group setting. And in the next slide, we'll look at that. There's a 3-step process to use here for problem resolution. First one, resolve within the team or in private discussions between you and your student. This may be something you can do now that we're doing all virtual. This may be something that you would need to have a parent there if you're doing it over a Zoom or a virtual meeting. Or in some cases, I don't know, maybe it can be a phone call. It just depends on the age of the child as well. So involving the student's parent and your district coordinator, if it gets to you need more counsel of others, it's going to be good to include them. And although it's extremely rare, some students, maybe this is just not their thing. Maybe they need to be discharged from the group after consultation with school officials. And this would be in a very rare instance that this might happen. Okay, next slide. Working with a co-manager is extremely helpful. It's really good to have another person in the room, another person in these meetings, of course, to observe and respond to maybe challenging situations or giving some help and explanation as to what's going on. And then the next slide. It's important then to find that delicate balance between being totally task-oriented, totally task-focused, and being fun-focused. And there's ways to do that. And sometimes issues in team dynamics are more likely to occur with managers who just are doing one thing or the other. They're drifting into all just fun stuff, or they're getting away, from the organization and agenda. And it's trying to seek that balance. And there's many examples of facilitating teamwork for success I believe, in the rules of the road and maybe in the roadmap. There's some good examples, and I think Matt will go into some more of those about how you build your team and have things that they can do to build that teamwork. The next slide. And of course, at the end of the day, consult with others, always consult with others if you're having issues. If you need to consult one of the people on the board, if you need to get back to any one of us, that would be certainly a thing to do. And consult with your school officials and any other parents that might be helpful in this aspect. Okay, I think I got done with that pretty quickly. But again, if you have any questions after this, please feel free to ask.
Okay, thank you, Beth. We're gonna pause just for a second. If anybody has any specific questions about Beth's managing group dynamics, go ahead and turn on your microphone and ask them now. Again, you can always use chat if you want. If anybody has any questions, go ahead and speak now. Okay, with that, we're on to the next topic. Matt Becker.
Great. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. Thank you for agreeing to manage a team. I am entering my 3rd year of managing a team with my wife, and I will actually be managing 2 teams this year. So I understand what that entails, and it's a big commitment. We appreciate it, and we really believe in the DI program. So I want to introduce you to some effective virtual meeting tips, as well as talk just briefly about some different activities you can do to kind of balance that fun versus task focus that Beth was referring to. But the first thing I want you to do is, if you look at the bottom of your window, you should see a participants button. And if you click on that, it will open up a participant panel. and you will see all of the participants. And at the bottom, you will see yes and no buttons. So my first question is, how many of you like virtual meetings? So if you like virtual meetings, click yes. If you do not like virtual meetings, click no. Okay, so we're starting to get some votes coming in. Okay, so the last group, the Rising Stars group, we had more people who did like virtual meetings. In this group, we have a lot more who don't. And maybe it's because you're thinking, you know, you've done DI before, and if, you know, even my wife's like, DI can't be done virtually. And I get it. I understand that there's that element of how do you do this virtually? What I will tell you, while it's going to be different, absolutely, and Vince kind of alluded to this earlier, our kids are going to learn skills that they would not have learned in any other normal DI year. They're going to learn whether it's meeting virtually and how to run good virtual meetings, whether it's videoing and how to edit video. That's stuff that they never would have had to do before. So even though this may not be the same and may not be as ideal, they're still going to get a lot out of this year. And so that's what's going to be exciting and different. So I'm going to move on. Let's go to the next slide. So I want to start with some kind of high-level tips and things for you to keep in mind. And that first bullet is virtual for one, virtual for all. So I'm going to go back to the participant panel again. I want you to answer this question. Have you ever been on a virtual meeting? So this would have been like pre-pandemic, a virtual meeting where maybe you and one other people were virtual and everybody else was in the same room, whether it's a conference room or something like that. So if you've had that experience where you and maybe one other person were virtual and everybody else was together, all right, so most of you have had that experience. Now, what I want you to do is in the chat panel, send in the message, what was that like? So when you were in that meeting and you or maybe one other people were virtual and everybody else was in the same room, what was that experience like? So throw a couple of thoughts quickly in the chat about that. Unbalanced, it's a good answer. The virtual people felt left out. Yes, good. Unproductive. Anybody else? Hard to hear, hard to collaborate. Okay, good answer. So, awkward, yes, very good. So here's the thing. If you look at this first bullet, virtual for one, virtual for all. And as I was writing this up, I was thinking of the Three Musketeers. If one person is virtual, everybody needs to be virtual. So if one person is virtual, everybody needs to be virtual. So if you are having a team and only one person's virtual and the rest of the team's getting together, that's not effective. Everybody has to be virtual. So really make sure you leverage that. Turn your video on. So several of you have your video on. We have our video on. You notice sometimes we're turning our video off because we're doing something and then we turn it back on. You know, I know some people aren't comfortable with the video. I really encourage you to become more comfortable with it, especially in your team environment. You're talking a smaller group of people. Again, maybe it's you and two co-managers and up to 7 people. So you're talking 9 people as a whole. It's so much better to see each other's facial expressions. You can put it in the gallery view and see everybody all on one page, especially if you've got less than 10 people. So really encourage your team to use that more often. It's not the same as being in person, but it does help. Mute background noise. So you guys are all muted, and that's great when we're in a presentation like this. If you are having a dialogue and a conversation, I would encourage you not to have people on mute. But if you're picking up a lot of background noise, it can still be distracting. So if you're hosting the meeting, you as the host have the ability to go and mute certain people who might be making a bunch of noise. So just kind of be aware of that. So even if you're starting with everybody off mute, but all of a sudden there's dogs in the background that are making a lot of noise, or somebody working out in the yard or something, just go ahead and mute that person to let some of that noise dissipate so that it's not distracting. One of the things that is really critical is that you ensure equal participation. And as a team manager, your job is largely to be the project manager, the facilitator, making sure everybody's getting heard. And that can be hard enough in an in-person meeting, but in a virtual meeting, it can be really easy for people to kind of recede to the background. So make sure you're paying attention to who's chiming in. Sometimes with Zoom, I'm not an introverted person. I typically will jump in fairly easily, but on a webinar call, I typically hold back a little bit because sometimes it's harder to know when somebody's done talking. So just watch that. If you see somebody trying to jump in and somebody's jumping over them, you know, make a point to bring that person into the conversation. And in a minute, I'll talk about some other activities and things you can do to help bring some of that participation in. And then make sure you take some breaks. That's really important. It's really easy to kind of just charge ahead and not take a break. You know, we're doing this on Zoom. You can choose what kind of platform you want to use. Zoom is a free platform for less than 3 people to meet. So basically just 2 people to meet indefinitely. But if you have 3 or more, you can meet free for 40 minutes. And then your meeting ends. So one of the things you could do is if you don't want to purchase a Zoom account, is you could break your meeting up in 40-minute segments. So you could say, okay, we're gonna meet for 40 minutes, then we're gonna take a 10-minute break, and then we're gonna start another meeting and meet for another 40 minutes. So that would be a way of forcing yourself to take a break in there. So just something to think about. The Zoom account, so if you did wanna have your own account, it's about $15 a month. And then I think you can have up to 100 people on, you know, your call. So that would be all that you would really need. So I'm going to show you a few features in Zoom. So if we go to the next slide. Now, I will say that I've worked with Zoom and WebEx primarily, a little bit with GoToMeeting. You know, there's Google Hangouts, there's Adobe Connect. There's lots of different programs out there. And they're all going to have roughly the same type of features. How you use them and how you access them are probably going to be a little bit different. But I would imagine that all the features I'm showing you probably exist in most of those other platforms. This screen shows you how you might share something. So if you see at the bottom of that screenshot, the green button that says share, and also if you look at your Zoom window, you'll see that same green button because this meeting has been set up so that anybody could share a document. I would imagine you're going to want to use this because maybe your team has divided up different aspects and tasks of the project, and they've documented some things that they need to come back and share with the team. Well, they could share right through Zoom so the rest of the team could see it, okay? Or could be pictures, it could be a video that they've created that they want to pull up and share for the team. So share is going to be a feature that you're most likely going to want to use. You'll see that once you open it up, it shows you the things that are available to share. So I could share my desktop. I don't typically do that. I would usually share a file of some sorts, whether it's a PowerPoint, a Word document, a picture. You'll see it says whiteboard, which I'm going to talk about here in a minute as well. One note about sharing, and I have found this just happens sometimes with Zoom, and I'm not really sure why. First, in order to share a document or a file, it has to be open on your computer. So if it's a Word document or a PowerPoint document, you have to have opened it up. Even though it's open on your computer, sometimes when you go into the sharing window, it will not show up. So what I typically do is I close the sharing window, I go back to that file in my computer, just kind of pull it back up, and then minimize it again, come back to Zoom, go back to sharing, and it usually pops up. Why it does that, I do not know, but don't get, you know, if you go into the share menu, you're like, oh my gosh, my document's not there. It's all right, just kind of back out of it, go back to the document, and then come back in. And every time I've done that, it shows up. So it's just kind of an interesting little glitch with Zoom. If we go to the next page, so this is the whiteboard, and this is a feature I believe you guys will want to use. So you can share a whiteboard through the share menu, like I saw, and you'll see that banner up at the top. This is like a little tool bar that has different things that you can do. So there's a text tool, so if you click on that, people can type. There's a draw tool, so you can do like a thinner pencil or a bigger marker, or you can draw shapes. You can change the color, you can erase. And so this is a great way where, let's say you're looking at one element of a central challenge and you're wanting to brainstorm, okay, so what ideas do you guys have for how to solve this element? You could type that element at the top of the whiteboard and then just let them type their thoughts on there. And so this is a great way of capturing everybody's thoughts and ideas. And then you can also save that. So that way you've held on to that, you don't lose it, okay? So that's just a great way to use the whiteboard. You could also create a slide like in PowerPoint or something like that that has that same element at the top and have them annotate on that slide as well. So there's a couple of different ways, but that's a great way of getting them involved in, engaged in the process, and allows everybody to see right on the screen what the thoughts are. The next slide will show us breakout rooms. Okay, so this is another feature that I think you will likely want to use. So again, let's say as you're getting further into the process, you've identified your challenge, you've kind of identified what you're going to do to address the different elements of the challenge, and maybe there's certain 2 or 3 kids that are going to work on this element, and 2 or 3 kids are going to work on this element. And so you can bring them together and put them in breakout rooms to talk through and work on that element. And so this first, well, actually, if you look at the bottom of the first screenshot off on the far left, over to the right-hand side, you'll see it says breakout rooms. So if you wanted to create a breakout room, you would click on that. I'm not sure if you guys see my pointer when I'm moving it over there, but you would click on that first. And then this pop-up box that you see in this first screenshot would show up, and it asks you how many breakout rooms do you want to create. You can do them automatically. So that means Zoom will just randomly assign people. Most likely you would want to do manually, particularly if, hey, Vince and Doug are working on this element and Mike and Beth are working on this element. So I want to assign specific people to specific groups, okay? Once you select what you want to do, then you go to that second screenshot. That's where you would see the different rooms. You can rename the rooms if you want. This is where, if you were doing manually, you would assign people to the room. And then that blue button at the bottom says open all rooms. When you click that, then it moves people into that breakout room, okay? Once they're in the breakout room, you would see that third screenshot, which would tell you, and you would be able to click on those drop-down arrows and see who's in what room. And then you can send a message. So you see broadcast message to all. You could send a message to all of them. So if you want to give them a 2-minute warning to say, hey, we're coming back in 2 minutes, make sure you're wrapping up. And then when you see that it says close all rooms, so one important thing to note is when you close the room, it tells them that the room is closing in 60 seconds. So they still have 60 seconds to finish wrapping up. They could choose to leave the room at any point in time in that 60 seconds, but at the end of that 60 seconds, the system will automatically bump them back into the main meeting, okay? There are, and I'm not going to go into this, but there are, like, you can create slides for them to work on or whiteboards for them to work on and do in their breakout room, and they can save that. So if those are things you want to do, you'd need to do a little bit more work understanding how that works. And especially if you've got older kids, middle school, high school, they may already know how to do that on Zoom. But Zoom has lots of tutorials out there as well. So, you know, if you're wanting to go a little bit deeper with some of that stuff, you can look that up. We'll go to the next slide. So the participant panel, you guys already used this. Honestly, when I put this in here, I was like, okay, will they use this in the team meeting or not? I love the participant panel because, as you saw, I've used it a couple of times just to get you guys engaged, to throw a question out there and get people engaged, get people's thoughts, and then, you know, I could follow up. So if somebody says yes, I could say, okay, Beth, so tell me, why did you say yes to this? Or, you know, why did you say no to this? So it's a great way, again, especially if you have somebody who's a little more quiet, a little more reserved, not jumping in. It's a great way to get them engaged and see where they're at, and then it can be a door opener for you to follow up and facilitate a deeper conversation. So I really like the use of the participant panel in that way. The next slide talks about chat, and you guys did this a little bit as well after, you know, giving me some insight on what it was like being the only virtual person in a meeting. Again, in your group sessions, if I'm thinking you've only got no more than 8 or 9 people in the session, my hope is that you're going to be able to have some free-flowing dialogue, and most of the time have yourself soft-mute, and maybe not need to use chat as frequently, but just know that that's there. So if people feel kind of quiet, you sense that, you know, maybe somebody's a little bit more reserved, again, chat, similar to the poll or the participant panel, throwing a question out in chat or asking them to respond to something in chat can be easier for somebody who's a little more quiet to kind of put their thoughts down, and then you can maybe call on them to elaborate if you want. So it's just another technique to try to bring people in so that you don't have 2 or 3 extroverted team members kind of dominating the conversation, and all the viewpoints that, you know, everything that gets selected ends up being their ideas because they're the most vocal. So that's what's really important there. I want to wrap up with a few team building ideas and things that you can do. These first 5 that are on this list actually come from the addendum to the roadmap. So they put out an addendum to the roadmap for this year, particularly for virtual. And these are things that I believe are in the original roadmap. So they're things you can do in-person meetings that you can adapt for virtual. So photo of your life, I think this is a great one, especially most kids. They love photos. Okay, so bring a photo of something that's really important to you, or a photo of something you did this past weekend, or a crazy pet photo, or, you know, something. You can kind of get creative, make it up. The alphabet game. So the idea here is they're going to tell a story, but you pick a random letter in the middle of the alphabet to start with. So maybe you start with R, and one person has to start the sentence with R for that story, and then it goes to the next person, and they have to follow in order. So the next sentence has to start with an S, and the next sentence has to start with a T, and so forth. Very similar to the one right under that, which would be one word at a time, where you're doing a story, but you're just doing it a word at a time, and it's not, when it's a word at a time, it's not kind of parametered by the letters of the alphabet. Energizer, the idea with Energizer is, can they agree on a favorite TV show and have them act out a scene from that TV show? So maybe it's, you know, their favorite scene, or they make up a scene. So again, that just also helps get their creative minds going in terms of presentation. There's a lot of our challenges, almost all of them have a presentation element, almost a drama element to it, a skit element, so really getting them thinking in that direction. Go, I like this one. I'm going to have to try this one with our kids, is very much kind of like Simon Says, but kind of get them up and moving around. And so the idea is you give them a command, but they can't go until you say go. So you might say, pat your stomach and hop on one foot, go. And, you know, my interpretation of this would be, you know, they're going to start to try to go, especially if you kind of pause before you say go. But, you know, again, that's a really good thing, especially when we're virtual, get them up, moving around, get those creative juices going. Social question, this is a good one. We always start all of our meetings with what we call our question of the week. So it might be, you know, what was the best thing you did this weekend? What are you going to be for Halloween? You know, what are you most excited about, you know, for the upcoming holidays? What, you know, something like that. Or it could be, okay, where would you like to go? What's your dream vacation? Or what's your proudest accomplishment? Or what's your favorite, you know, whatever, favorite movie? So that's a good way of just kind of introducing people and getting people comfortable. We like to start a meeting with that kind of question to help people kind of get settled in. And also just helps connect each other and get to know each other. Time machine, if they could go back in time to any time period, where would they go and why? And then the traditional, and you guys have probably all done this as adults before, 2 truths and a lie. I saw somewhere online they referred to it as kids for two truths and a fib. But, you know, what are 2 things that are true about the person? What's one thing that's not? Typically what you would do is have them chat them to you, and then you read them, so that the first thing is, can they guess who this is? So can the rest of the team guess who you're talking about? And then can they guess what the lie or the fib is? One thing I will tell you, and I forgot to tell the last group this, you can go Google virtual icebreakers or virtual team building activities, and you are going to find tons of information out there. Some of them are going to be more geared towards adults, but you can probably take some of those and tweak them and make them appropriate for kids. So there's so much information out there to help you know how to interject some fun and create some team building in a virtual environment. All right, so that's everything that I had. Vince, it looks like we got a little bit of time for questions if anybody's got a specific question now.
Yeah, so if anybody has a question to ask Matt or a comment even, go ahead, turn your microphone on and go ahead and speak up. Last chance, anybody? We'll have a Q&A at the end, but if you have anything specific about this session, go ahead and speak up. Okay, Doug, I think we're ready for the next session then. Okay, this next session is the youth protection policy, and this is new as of last year, and this year DI is really hammering it home. DI provides an educational experience where team members can thrive, they can learn, they can have fun in a safe and caring environment. Everybody in this room either has or will have passed a background check. I hate talking about this, but it's a sad reality of our times, and I'm not here to bum anybody out. So these policies, next slide, I'm sorry. These policies are in effect whether you're meeting virtually or in person. Any meeting involving an adult and a student must have a team manager that has passed a background check. You cannot decide that you're going to have Mike that you met at Home Depot teach your team how to cut wood, and Mike's going to go off and do it on his own. You have to be there as the adult that has passed a background check. Before you can even compete, you will need to agree to the code of conduct, and that part of that code of conduct involves you reading and following this youth protection policy. It's on our website. I know this sounds hokey. I honestly encourage you to download that and read it through. There's some important things on there that you as an adult, it's something that you have to do. Next slide. So these things are from the youth protection policy. I'm not going to read them word for word. I'm going to go a little bit off script here. Everybody take a moment to go ahead and fidget in your chair. What I'm about to say it's uncomfortable to hear. It's uncomfortable to talk about. Outside of your control, there are things that are going to happen to children in this world. You and I are not trained professionals. We're not social workers. No one expects you to be Johnny on the spot and be, a policeman about this, but you need to be able to recognize the telltale signs of some type of abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, or God forbid, sexual abuse. Next slide. Fortunately, since I'm not trained to discuss these issues, DI has developed an online course for you to review. In your mailbox, when you became a team manager, you would have gotten an email from DI about this training that you can take. And I'll go ahead and throw that into the chat room, the email address and what to look for. If you can't find it, I'll send an email. I'll put into the chat box the lady that's in charge of it. You send her an email and say, hey, I need another invitation to the Adobe training. Fortunately, in that training, you'll want to go there because there are about a dozen classes that you as a team manager can and probably should take. I mean, there's silly things like how to fill out an expense report, how DI scoring works. They are really actually pretty helpful, besides this one about youth protection policy. Next slide. So again, a lot of words here. I want to finish off this topic and get through of it by saying I'm sure that none of us can ever contemplate harming a child. To me personally, it's inconceivable that I would ever do it, and I can't understand how anybody else could ever do it. Next slide. But we have to face facts. It can and may happen. So it's very important that we know this policy, we understand why it's there. You may very well have a child, we're in an age of COVID, they may be trapped in their house with a parent that's lost their job and they're just at their wits' end. and they're taking it out on that child. And you may be that child's only link to the outside world, and they're giving you subtle clues that their life is in danger, or they're just, you know, they're being harmed in somehow. So I really need you to take this class on the DI website, just so that in the back of your mind, like I said, I don't expect you to be in the class. It talks about, you know, different signs are like, you know, bruises. I mean, I don't expect you to go into your meeting and examine everybody for bruises, but just in the back of your mind, you need to know these things exist. So next slide. I guess let me finish this off. This is a big bummer. That I hate talking about this subject. When I was approached to it as a regional manager, I had to take the class, and I thought, I'm out of here. I don't want to deal with this. It's unfair to me as someone that could never contemplate this. It's unfair to me that I have to be exposed to this. I want out. But your students they're counting on you to be brave and deal with this. I mean, it's an ugly subject, but you need to be prepared in case it ever happens. So I'm actually sweating right now. That's all. Maybe it's a coffee I had. That's all I'm going to say about that. We're going to grab a quick break. It is 11:53. Let's, I guess 11 o'clock straight up, Doug or Matt.
Yeah,
Probably be
let's 12 o'clock, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah. So let's take a quick break. Go grab some coffee. We provided Bill's Donuts for everybody. Doug, where's the Bill's Donuts?
I think they went to Sinclair.
They're at Sinclair. Okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Go grab take a peek at the sun, breathe in some fresh air. We're going to go ahead and stop recording right now. And we will see you at 12 noon straight up. And we'll see you then.